There's a huge amount going on in our intelligence agencies at the moment. There are currently at least 6 criminal cases open against former employees at the State Security Agency. On Friday, you would have seen the former Minister of State Security, David Mahlobo, refusing to answer some questions and give much detail, including about documents he signed, operations he signed off on. Dale McKinley's from the organisation Right to Know. Dale, good afternoon to you. Mahlobo was State Security Minister during the time when Jacob Zuma was president. What kind of role did he play at the time?
Well, he played the role that he was asked to play, which was one of the reasons why he was deployed there was basically to provide cover for Jacob Zuma, who was already in big trouble at the time, who was fighting not only legal challenges, but was also fighting factional battles within the ANC. And if listeners and viewers remember, prior to the Polokwane takeover from the Zuma faction, there had been a commissioned report into the State Security Agency by then Minister Ronnie Kasrils. And that Matthews Commission report had indicated that it was riven with factionalism, with corruption, with a whole range of things. So David Mahlobo came into a State Security Agency already in trouble, and he basically poured fuel onto the fire.
So, was the agency playing a political role? And I suppose it wasn't just involved in domestic South African politics. Some people would suggest it was involved in the internal politics of the ANC.
Absolutely. It's quite clear if one looks at the Matthews Commission report, which was finally unveiled many years later, and then the high-level commission report that was commissioned a few years ago. The story is quite clear that there were rogue elements, which you could say, and units within the SSA that basically were doing as they pleased. They were assessing opponents within the ANC. They were spying on them. They were tapping their phones, basically leading up to the Nasrec ANC Congress. So this was something that the SSA had been involved in for quite a number of years, and it only got worse under Zuma because the State Security Agency basically became, under Mahlobo, his private spying agency.
Is it, do we know if Zuma knew? Do we know even if Mahlobo knew everything that was going on? And it gets very complicated because oversight of an intelligence service is always very difficult. Even in countries that have been democratic and free for a lot longer than us have found this actually quite a difficult area. Just look at what happens in the United States, for example. We've all seen the movies. Is it possible to know if the people at the very top, the minister, the president at the time, actually knew what was going on supposedly in their name?
Well, giving the benefit of the doubt, we could say that the minister didn't know every single thing. But, part of the sort of modus operandi of the Zuma faction was deniability, was to keep arm's enough length from the really nasty stuff that was going on or the things that would potentially cause a lot of trouble and say, well, I didn't know about them. This has been the defense of Jacob Zuma for a long time with regards to the arms deal or whatever it might be. So you get this. Not, as you said, not just in South Africa, but internationally. But in the case of the Zuma administration, it was clear that they wanted to make it even more. They wanted to know pretty much everything. If you looked at the General Laws Intelligence Amendment Bill, which was introduced in 2013, this is where the State Security Agency was formed. They melded foreign intelligence and domestic intelligence together and basically put all the power in the minister's hands. So it's going to be very, very difficult for Mahlobo and others to now start saying, we didn't know what was going on, when in fact the laws that they were championing were giving them more powers to know exactly everything that was going on.
I suppose it's easy to forget some of the things that happened. There was, I remember, a theft from a safe. How do you rob a safe within an intelligence agency? It was foreign currency. There was a meeting with the public protector about a reserve bank. There were incredible things that were happening at the time.
Absolutely. It was, everything from the slush fund, whether that was police crime intelligence or the State Security Agency spending it on grabbers and all sorts of other kinds of equipment, or whether that was paying off people and informers that were spying on other political opponents. We simply don't know the extent. But what we do know from the high-level commission panel report is that it was a mess, and they were out of control. Essentially, what the politicians did and what Zuma did and others was to say, do what you need to do. I really don't want to know about it. And when we do know about it, then do as much as you can to basically either obfuscate the situation, deny it, or cover it up. And this has been the modus operandi for a number of years, and it has hobbled our intelligence capacity. So the other byproduct of this, Stephen, is that basically our intelligence services can't even give us intelligence on some of the most basic and challenging things in our own country. Xenophobic violence, for example, when it arose a couple of years ago, the intelligence agencies were nowhere to be found. When the trucks started to be put on light across the N2 and N3, no intelligence there either. So the things that the intelligence services were supposed to be doing, they weren't doing. Instead, they were playing politics on the side.
So let's talk about reform. Obviously, there was that high-level panel report. It made certain recommendations. We all saw the recommendations. They were made public. It made findings. Not all of that report was made public. There were bits of it that were not. There's sort of supposedly new brooms in play at the State Security Agency. Do you believe it is actually reforming? And this takes us to a bigger question. How do you know?
Well, I think, first of all, there has been some progress. So, for example, when President Ramaphosa came in, and one of the first things, when he looked at that report, he said, we must again separate the intelligence services. We must have a foreign intelligence. We must have domestic intelligence. They must be operationally separate. We must begin to have all the oversight mechanisms, for example, were basically hobbled. So there was nobody that was actually doing any oversight or any accountability to. These are beginning to be sort of reintroduced and strengthened. We still have a long way to go with regards to parliamentary oversight, for example, or an independent panel that begins to look at some of these problems. But I would say we're beginning to get there. However, the rot is very, very deep. And one can see this, for example, in the continuous tensions that are ongoing between the present minister, the Director General, and the inspectorate, the intelligence inspectorate. They're fighting each other over who can say what and who's responsible for all of this mess. So I think it's going to take quite some time. I think that it would benefit us if we had some continuity in the political oversight for a second Ramaphosa sort of administration. I think that would allow some of these initial moves to begin to be set and begin to take a more positive impact.
Do we need to change the structure? I mean, again, as I make the point, and I think it's worth repeating, that other democracies find this difficult to do proper oversight. Is there a sort of best possible structure that you can actually use in a case like this?
Well, I think, we default to our Constitution, and our Constitution says the default is openness and transparency and not secret. We understand that intelligence agencies have to have degrees of secrecy. We understand that there are certain things that can't be shared, particularly operational, on others. But besides those kinds of things, I think where we really do need to change is we need to change the culture. And one of the ironic things about our post-apartheid transition was that the old apartheid spooks and the new spooks found a common ground in making things very secret. I mean, if you listen to David Mahlobo the other day, you would think that everybody's spying on everyone and everything should be secret. This is not the principles and values of our country and our Constitution. And if anything needs to change, it's those things need to be reinserted into the operations of our security agency so that they're accountable to the people and not some kind of doing basically what they please.
There was an amazing story a couple of weeks ago about the NPA supposedly trying to raid one of the headquarters, or the main national headquarters, of the State Security Agency. We don't actually know what they were really looking for. We just know they weren't able to do it. They were sort of stopped. I mean, it's that kind of story where we know a little bit, but not really enough, that is going to mean, I would suggest, that the public perception of the intelligence agencies is going to be that they're not actually up to the public good.
Absolutely, and this is, I mean, as long as the spooks, as the sort of generic term would be given, the spies, think that they're a power to themselves and that they're not accountable to anybody, and that then they're going to continue to do this as they have, and be able to tell a law enforcement agency, no, sorry, you can't come onto our property, as if it's their personal property, as opposed to public state property. So I think what we have to have a rejigging of the priorities and also the lines of communication, the lines of authority with regards. The State Security Agency should be no different from any other state agency. It's accountable to the people, it's accountable to the representatives of our democracy, and it's accountable to the executive itself. These things need to be reasserted, and they need to be done so very strongly, because if we don't, we're going to have a situation where I think, Nazareth and Polokwane are going to look like child's play, given what the potential state security agencies could get up to, not just in terms of domestic politics, but we have other kinds of foreign issues and challenges that need to be paid attention to, particularly in our neighborhood, which is getting a bit, should we say, rough. And the intelligence agencies, if they're not up to that task, then the real security of our population will be compromised.
Dale McKinley from Right to Know, thanks very much indeed. Really do appreciate it. All right.